When the city of Atlantic City was shrouded in the nocturnal haze of glittering casino lights and raucous noise, a young entrepreneur with insatiable ambition was already planning his next move. Donald, then not yet a world-renowned billionaire, dreamed of achieving far more than fleeting success. He understood that reaching the pinnacle required not only dazzling projects, but also the willingness to play by his own, often shadowy rules. From his earliest days, Donald absorbed the harsh lessons of the business world. In one early memory, when even the sounds of Queen's Ecu streets seemed to echo his future victories, he witnessed his father, a self-assured businessman, sealing deals in which moral scruples were routinely sacrificed in favor of cold calculation. It was then that he realized, genuine success demands decisive action, even if the decisions seem dubious at times. Recalling those youthful days, Donald would regale acquaintances with childhood stories, tales of negotiating in the school cafeteria for the last pie using cunning and subtle tricks to earn the respect of his peers. Those moments were not mere coincidences. They formed the first building blocks of the empire he would one day create. Fate eventually brought him to Atlantic City, a place where luxurious buildings and the dazzling lights of casinos promised not only wealth but also fame. Donald saw in it the opportunity to prove to himself and the world that his strategy worked. With unbridled enthusiasm, he dove into creating his own casino, confident he could transform the venture into a veritable gold mine. But behind the bright facade of the casino lay complex financial schemes and murky agreements. Cleverly exploiting loopholes in the law, Donald inflated the valuation of properties to create the illusion of stability and prosperity. His partners believed the risks were minimal and profits inevitable. Yet, before long, bankruptcies and lawsuits began to hound the project, as though each minor expense demanded repayment in full. With every new setback, he managed to explain his strategy as if events were unfolding according to a pre-written script in which he invariably emerged victorious. In Manhattan, where the city's soaring skyline seemed to define the limits of human ambition, Donald decided to erect a skyscraper that would symbolize a new era. Trump Tower, a name that promised not only a new level of luxury but also a new chapter in the annals of business, was unveiled amid a flurry of press conferences. Surrounded by the bright flash of cameras and the admiring gazes of reporters, he assured everyone that the project was the epitome of successful urban development. Yet behind the flashy slogans and impressive presentations, a different drama was unfolding. In the shadows of the towering building, fierce negotiations took place with suppliers and contractors, where contract terms shifted right before the eyes of those unsuspecting of being deceived. One striking episode involved a deal in which the payment conditions were altered at the last moment, leaving suppliers in an extremely disadvantaged position. For Donald, it was another opportunity to boost his profits. For his detractors, it was a bitter lesson in how human expectations could be ruthlessly exploited. In his bid to expand his empire, Donald even launched a project meant to revolutionize education, Trump University. He promised a transformation of the mind, offering knowledge that could change students' lives. The training was spun as a magical program that would unlock the secrets of the business world. However, behind the shiny advertising campaigns lay a stark reality. The course content was superficial, and its methodologies were woefully underdeveloped. Many students, hoping to gain the key to wealth, soon found themselves the victims of a meticulously orchestrated deception. Subsequent lawsuits became a resounding testament to how enticing promises can turn into an expensive lesson for the gullible. One of the most memorable episodes in his career involved negotiations with material suppliers for the construction of his latest project. I recall one of his former partners later recounting, "Donald walked into the negotiation room with such charm that he immediately captured everyone's attention. But then the real show began. Every word he uttered made us feel that we were compelled to yield, lest we lose even more than we already had." His tactic of emotional pressure, backed by an unwavering self-confidence, left an indelible mark on everyone who dealt with him on business matters. Every one of Donald A.'s projects, be it a casino or an educational institution, was inevitably accompanied by legal battles. In one dramatic court fight, when yet another venture teetered on the brink of bankruptcy, his team of lawyers rescued him by exploiting a loophole in the law. The company's assets were transferred to another account, and the business continued to operate under a new name. These tense, razor-sharp moments vividly demonstrated that in Donald's world, the price of success was justified by any means necessary. At press conferences and on television, Donald had a knack for turning even the most contentious moments into a display of sheer willpower. He insisted that all the critical comments were nothing more than attempts to undermine his reputation, and every move he made was thoroughly rooted in business logic. Yet behind these public addresses lay darker stories that remained hidden from the general public. Stories of people whose hopes and livelihoods were put on the line. Stories of subtle manipulations that could change the outcome of a deal in mere minutes. Behind each major project, there were lawsuits that confirmed what Donald himself preferred to keep silent. People caught in the web of his deals lost not only their money but also their faith in the possibility of honest business. The legal battles unfolding in the courts served as the final chords in the symphony of his ruthless pursuit of power and wealth. Every judicial verdict underscored the inevitability that behind the beautiful facade lay a cruel reality. Thus, amid the flashing lights of Atlantic City, the clamor of negotiations and the thunder of courtrooms, the image of Donald was being forged, a man who walked the line between legitimate entrepreneurship and outright deception. His path was littered with instances in which the hunger for riches and the lust for power overshadowed all moral principles. And although many admired his ability to achieve his goals, every success came at a price paid by innocent people. This story is not merely a collection of facts and deals. It is a living narrative about how dreams and ambitions can be turned into a tool for attaining power, even if that means treading the darkest of paths. Every specific situation, every contentious moment reveals the truth about who Donald was behind the veil of glamour and glory. After such a dramatic beginning, when the fate of the casino, the skyscraper, and the educational project had all been swept into a vortex of lawsuits and silent, ruthless negotiations, Donald felt that his experience and relentlessness deserved a new arena for self-realization. Business disputes alone could no longer remain the sole focus. Whispers began to circulate that his methods and character merited far greater attention. It was during this period, when financial crises transformed into a favorable stage for rethinking strategy, that he sensed the business world was offering not one but several paths to power. One misty autumn morning in New York, he was invited to a closed meeting with influential figures. In a room bathed in the soft glow of lamps, the confident voices of bankers, lawyers, and politicians resonated, each understanding that what was at stake was not merely another bank loan but the chance to rewrite the rules of power. It was there, in a dimly lit office behind a massive table, that Donald first experienced the thrill of realizing that his boundless ambition and ruthless business practices could serve as instruments of influence not just in commerce, but on the global political stage. With each new deal and every successfully navigated court battle, he grew increasingly convinced that his path was not simply a string of shrewd maneuvers, but an entire strategy for capturing public attention. On one such day, when news of his triumphant emergence from yet another crisis filled the headlines of business journals, Donald decided it was time to make a statement in a different key. He began granting interviews in which he cautiously yet persistently touched upon political topics. His words, at first appearing to be nothing more than a manifesto of business optimism, quickly transformed into a symbol of protest against what he called an elite detached from reality. In one such interview, conducted in the luxurious interior of his office skyscraper, he confidently declared that business was not solely about money, but about strength. The strength capable of changing the fate of a country. His oratorical prowess, reinforced by an uncompromising confidence, made thousands stop and think. Perhaps this man knew far more than he let on. Yet, behind every word spoken before millions lay a meticulously honed strategy. His public appearances were always accompanied by carefully orchestrated advertising campaigns that featured the image of a self-assured leader ready to challenge the old order. Meanwhile, in the secretive corridors of politicians and business magnates, intrigues continued, where negotiation tactics and compromises sometimes determined the fate of entire companies and even city districts. A turning point came when, faced with yet another wave of lawsuits and media criticism, Donald realized it was time to act decisively. In one memorable instance, when one of his largest projects teetered on the brink of bankruptcy, he personally stepped into negotiations with a group of creditors. The meeting took place in an opulent conference room, where the very walls seemed imbued with the history of great deals. Yet the atmosphere was heavy not only with anticipation but also with palpable tension. The creditors, confident that the threat of legal repercussions would force him into compromise, were pleasantly surprised by his cold calculation. Sitting at the table, Donald methodically laid out the financial documents, while his legal team prepared arguments to validate the legality of his chosen schemes. He masterfully pointed out the nuances of the contracts, noting that many issues could be resolved by exploiting loopholes in the law. In just a few hours, the terms of the deal were rewritten in his favor, leaving his opponents with little choice but to submit to forced concessions. This scene served as a vivid demonstration of how the worlds of business and politics had merged. Every move he made was calculated to leave his adversaries with no room for maneuver, while his allies strengthened their advantageous positions. His reputation was not built on honesty, but on his remarkable ability to exploit the weaknesses of others, turning each intrigue into another trophy. After several years marked by a series of successful court battles and high-profile public appearances, the dark shadow of his business career served as a springboard for an even more ambitious move: entering politics. This step signified not merely a change in strategy but a veritable revolution in the approach to power. Tapping into widespread public dissatisfaction, manipulating mass emotions, and skillfully using the media became the primary tools through which Donald intended to reshape the political landscape. In one of the behind-the-scenes conversations held among his inner circle, he spoke candidly about the importance of merging the image of a successful businessman with the charisma of a leader. "The public needs strong hands," he declared, "and strong hands achieve their goals, even if that means bending the established rules." These words seem to foreshadow not merely a political candidacy, but an outright upheaval in the political system. A system where traditional ideals would yield to the cold, hard calculations of commerce. Soon after, Donald began speaking before audiences, his hard-hitting statements and call for a fight against the ruling elite resonating deeply with countless citizens disillusioned by the established political order. His speeches were replete with personal anecdotes, stories of unscrupulous businessmen, of how the system allowed some to profit at the expense of others, and of his own commitment to overturning that paradigm by exalting personal leadership. Every speech unfolded like a vivid spectacle in which drama and sarcasm played out on the stage. One of the most memorable episodes of this period was a meeting with a group of economists and business analysts organized by an influential media outlet and limited only to a select, trusted few. Donald took the stage to discuss the country's economic prospects, and in that context, he did not shy away from elaborating on his seemingly controversial methods. At that roundtable, he provided concrete examples of how, through ingenious financial schemes, his team not only managed to avoid bankruptcy but also birthed new business ventures even amid an economic crisis. He explained that by finalizing deals at the very last minute, his team was able to transfer assets to new accounts, thereby keeping the company operational. The data he presented, although abstract to the uninitiated, left a lasting impression on those with even a rudimentary understanding of accounting and financial trickery. This candor appeared to shatter the conventional notion of where the line between legality and fraud lay. Yet for him, it was not just a demonstration of strength. It was a calculated way of convincing the public that success only comes to those who play by their own rules. Watching his audience, he noted the shifting expressions on their faces, from initial skepticism to growing admiration. In that moment, it became clear that his words were striking a chord with people hungry for change. Such unwavering confidence, bolstered by concrete examples and disclosures, became the driving force behind his continued ascent. Every story, every figure from his business battles, turned into a tool capable of persuading even the most skeptical voters. Meanwhile, behind closed doors in luxurious offices and narrow corridors of business buildings, conspiracies and intrigues continued to unfold. His advisors, lawyers, and close allies convened daily to discuss new methods to minimize risks and maximize profits. These meetings evolved into true strategic sessions where even the smallest detail could prove decisive in the battle for power and influence. One such secret conversation took place in a dimly lit conference room, where the sharpest minds capable of analyzing the most complex financial and legal structures gathered around a round table. It was at that moment that they discussed a plan designed to reallocate assets so that, despite all the blows from the judicial system, not a single ruble would be lost. "We are not looking for mistakes in the books," one trusted associate whispered. "We're searching for opportunities to interpret the law as we see fit." These words epitomized their adopted methods. For Donald and his team, the law was merely a tool to be adjusted to serve their benefit. And the more masterfully they wielded this tool, the harder it became to discern the true cost of success hidden behind the glitter of business negotiations and bombastic statements. The passion reached its zenith when Donald A.'s first steps onto the political stage began to generate widespread public resonance. Street protests organized in support of his ideas went hand in hand with his grand-scale advertising campaigns. On the streets, in the pages of newspapers, and across television airwaves, his slogans promised radical change and a return of power to the people, those who, he claimed, had been deceived for years by the ruling classes. In one pivotal national television interview, he addressed millions of viewers, declaring that the system was unjust and that its elites were merely profiteering at the expense of ordinary citizens. His voice, confident and resolute, resounded like a call to action. A call for the time of change had come. Yet behind these booming declarations lay thousands of details, corroborated by court rulings and exposés, which indicated that his path to power was paved with dubious deals and deliberate distortions of the truth. At that decisive moment, his image, built upon naked examples drawn from hard-knock business realities, became the subject of intense public scrutiny. Documentaries, investigative reports, and countless interviews with former partners ignited the news, forcing people to confront the notion that success was not achieved solely through glamorous promises, but also at the price of shadowy schemes that seldom came under the strict oversight of the law. The very next day, following that sensational interview, when the streets were abuzz with heated debates, Donald was already meeting with his closest advisors. In their eyes shone the certainty that the old order was receding, yielding to a new era in which there would be no more compromises with the adversaries. Every calculation and strategy that had previously been regarded as merely sound business practice now transformed into a weapon in the struggle for political power and influence. In that moment, he quietly declared, "Our journey is only just beginning. It is time to prove that those who fear change have long since lost their relevance." His words exuded an aura of unyielding persuasion, and his determination to overturn a system built on personal gain and deceit seemed almost inevitable. And so, step by step, his empire, founded on ruthless calculation and cunning tactics, entered a new phase, a phase in which business and politics merged into one, and the law became a flexible instrument for achieving personal ambition. This second chapter of the narrative was not merely a continuation of a path paved by harsh methods and dubious deals. It served as the starting point for changes that would soon upend the established order of society. Employing his skills of persuasion and manipulation, Donald intended to prove that even the most questionable methods could be legitimized if wielded by someone who understood the true cost of power. Thus ended the second part of the account, a story of how the boundaries between business and politics blurred, and how every subsequent step was not just an attempt at self-realization, but also a beacon for the multitude of those yearning for change, even if the price for those changes turned out to be too high. When Donald E.'s business ventures had ceased to be mere financial transactions and had transformed into a theatrical stage for his ruthless calculations, a new frontier began to emerge on the horizon, power capable of changing an entire nation. This phase was marked not by abstract declarations but by vivid, concrete incidents where every event served as a stepping stone toward the political Olympus. One chilly evening in New York, Donald was invited to a closed dinner at one of the city's most prestigious clubs. Gathered around a massive round table illuminated by the soft glow of antique chandeliers were several influential figures, bankers, high-ranking officials, and leading politicians. The atmosphere was almost tangible. A sense hung in the air that the very fate of entire companies and public systems was being decided within these walls. At this dinner, he did not resort to vague generalities about his past business deals. Instead, he provided a concrete example from his own practice. He recalled how, at the peak of a financial crisis, his casino, Trump Taj Mahal, had teetered on the brink of bankruptcy. "Remember that night," he recounted, "when suppliers, so confident in the stability of the project, received notifications of revised payment terms? I personally entered negotiations with representatives of leading construction companies and said, 'We can change the terms, but remember, this is a game and every move counts.' It was then that we secured concessions that saved not only the project but also hundreds of jobs." The mention of specific figures, such as a 15% concession on the terms, added weight to his words, and those present listened intently to every word. A turning point came with one of his first national television interviews, where Donald appeared not just as a businessman, but as a candidate capable of addressing the problems of an entire nation. In the studio, before thousands of cameras, he recounted his experience negotiating with creditors when his enterprise was on the brink of liquidation. "It turned out," he said, "that in a lavish conference room of one of the nation's largest banks, where the walls were adorned with portraits of former presidents, I confronted a group of creditors determined to force me into compromise. But I disassembled the contract piece by piece before everyone's eyes, showing exactly where the law granted us loopholes. In the end, the terms of the deal were revised, and even the detractors had to admit that we had found a way out." He cited exact figures regarding sums and interest rates. These concrete numbers, bolstered by documentary evidence, made the interview sensational. Millions of viewers saw that behind every decisive step lay real examples of battle in the harsh world of business. In the wake of these televised revelations, business circles across the nation began organizing rallies in support of his ideas. One of the most memorable events was a protest at the central square of a small but bustling town. Beneath the arches of a historic building that exuded a magical evening aura, Donald addressed thousands of people. He did not restrict himself to generic slogans but shared detailed anecdotes from his practice. "I remember," he said, "how, in the midst of the crisis, I personally visited the offices of our suppliers. Despite their protests and desperate attempts to reclaim any semblance of profit, we managed to renegotiate contract terms. I saw the faces of people who believed that the law was infallible, and the proof was that we saved the project from complete collapse." His speech was accompanied by the display of photographs from those days and short video clips capturing the tense negotiations that eventually gave way to victorious smiles on his team AC's faces. Concrete examples, such as the rescue of the Trump Taj Mahal EU project and the successful renegotiation of debt terms, sparked a storm of applause and shouts of approval. No words can fully convey the depth of the struggle without acknowledging the very real court battles that became turning points in his career. In one highly publicized lawsuit over his company's assets, when the world watched the fight for control, it was revealed that, thanks to meticulously crafted financial strategies, more than $30 million in assets had been preserved that might otherwise have been lost. Details appeared in business journals. Donald A.S. lawyers cited exact contract clauses and referenced subtle nuances of legal norms that allowed the swift transfer of assets to new accounts mere hours before a final court ruling. These numbers, supported by documentary proof, became symbols of his skill in wielding the law as a tool to achieve his objectives. For his supporters, this was evidence that behind the seeming chaos of legal disputes lay a finely honed methodology capable of saving even the most desperate situations. Behind the scenes of his campaign, in the offices of large corporations and the conference rooms of high-end hotels, discreet meetings took place where the finer details of a future upheaval of the old system were discussed. At one such closed session, rumored to have included not only business magnates but also influential political figures, Donald detailed how by exploiting legal loopholes he had once managed to transfer the assets of a company on the brink of bankruptcy, thereby saving not only its financial stability but also hundreds of jobs. He mentioned a concrete figure, a sum of $50 million redistributed in mere hours, a revelation that ignited intense discussion among those present. These fact-laden meetings became the bedrock of his subsequent campaign. His audience saw that behind the grand rhetoric lay tangible, documented examples. Every success bolstered not only the confidence of his inner circle, but also that of a public yearning for change. Thus, Donald's path transformed into a series of real, measurable victories. From negotiations in opulent conference rooms to courtroom battles where every figure and every exploited loophole propelled him closer to power. His personal stories, enriched with concrete examples, became compelling arguments in the eyes of voters. Behind every statement lay hard-won experiences, triumphs, and lessons proving that even in a world dominated by cutthroat business deals and covert negotiations, a path to change can be found.